Roughly 6 months after each Galaxy Ultra smartphone is released is always a really interesting time. I mean, the initial hype has died down. It's just around the corner from Apple announcing their latest iPhone Pro flagship in September. And if you wait just a few more months, a brand new Galaxy model gets released, which generally means now is when some pretty juicy discounts start popping up. But aside from all that, in this video, I want to focus on my long-term experiences with a few key aspects of the S24 Ultra, because we already know it's an awesome phone. I mean, everyone's already covered the usual stuff like performance, battery, and design, etc. in previous videos. Also, thanks to Sunsama for sponsoring part of this video and helping me keep this channel self-funded and unbiased, including buying this S24 with my own money, but more on Sunsama later. So whatever you do on phone, you have to do it through an interface, right? Which is the screen. So in my opinion, this is one of, if not the most important aspect of a phone. Now, the OLED screen is just amazing. Straight up the best phone screen on the market, in my opinion. I always struggle with screen brightness in outdoor environments. I mean, if it's a particularly sunny day here in Australia, you can barely see anything on the screen on most phones. On the S24, not only is it bright enough to see clearly when outside and trying to take a picture, for example, but I didn't need to remove my sunglasses either. And that's not something I've been able to do on my iPhone. Now, the tech specs claim the screen can output 2,600 nits, and that's typically what a lot of reviews quote, but that's referring to peak HDR brightness. So brief flashes of light or explosions and stuff while watching HDR content. The actual maximum brightness level of the entire screen is only around 1,600 nits, which is still a lot, and to put it into perspective, most OLED monitors cap out at about 500 nits, so the pixels on this phone can get roughly 3 times brighter than that. But the special ingredient that makes the screen so good is Corning's Gorilla Armor, which is the actual glass covering the OLED panel. It has built-in anti-reflective properties that claim to reduce reflections by 75%. It's not a matte coating or anything. The screen is still glossy and smooth, and text and UI elements are still super sharp. And when I watched the initial reviews on the S24, I thought this was a bit of a gimmick. It's hard to describe and show visually on video, but it just absorbs reflections really well. So if I'm outside or even just watching a dark movie scene inside and my face is reflecting on the screen, it's much less noticeable, especially when comparing my iPhone 15 Pro side by side. And yes, you can see significantly more scratching on the 15 Pro screen, which indicates the Samsung's glass is just superior. Although to be fair, I have used the 15 Pro more than the S24. And then there's the content consumption. Colors, videos, and images just look incredible. Again, there's just no comparison. It truly is like watching a mini version of my LG C3 OLED TV I bought last year. Pro tip, for some reason, Samsung defaults the screen resolution to FHD Plus or 1080p. You can go into the screen resolution settings and change this to QHD Plus to get the full 1440p resolution of the screen. It does impact battery life, but I didn't notice any significant differences. Now, I did hear about some users reporting a grainy display. For some, it's visible at all times, but for others, only in low light. I can only comment on my individual unit, which didn't have any issues. One issue I did personally experience was some scrolling inconsistency on certain apps, particularly third-party apps like Instagram. Or, for example, Google Chrome. It felt a bit sluggish and almost a bit laggy at times, but when switching to Samsung's browser app, Samsung Internet, it worked perfectly. Side note, one feature I found myself using all the time was one-handed mode. In settings, there's an advanced features menu where you can enable this, swipe down on the center of the bottom edge of the screen to use one-handed mode, and you can also reposition and resize the window. Now, if you found that helpful, may I also recommend an app you can download on your phone that makes it really simple to structure your life into just one piece of software instead of using all of these different to-do, timer, and calendar apps. That app is called Sunsama, the sponsor for this section of the video. To put it simply, it's more like an assistant that allows you to just get stuff done without the fuss and without burning out. For example, I can break down each individual day and add tasks, including automatically importing from Google Calendar, Notion, or my emails, and even time block certain things like what I want to work on that day. I also get notifications on my phone to help me stick to my time blocks and tasks. And I know what you're thinking, sounds similar to Google Calendar, right? But Sunsama takes it a step further. Within each task, I can add notes, comments, attach files, set a due date, and even set a timer to keep track of how much time I spend doing certain tasks. There's a focus mode and a Pomodoro timer. And I just keep this screen up on my phone while working to minimize distractions and keep me on track. Once it's time to end the day, there's a daily shutdown ritual which shows me a breakdown of my time spent throughout the day, and it's a great way to wind down and chill out. So get a 30-day extended trial of Sunsama using the link below. It's free to try and you don't even have to put your credit card in. Now, it's no secret that the camera on the S24 is very good, and I had the chance to compare it against the iPhone 15 Pro in a very cold and very snowy Sapporo, Japan, just a few months ago. I'll do a full video on this comparison later, but one area the S24 blew me away in was the zoom capability. It just keeps going, and it's actually really useful. I went up to the top of the Sapporo TV tower where the observation deck is about 100 meters off the ground. The people walking around below looked like ants, but with the S24, I could actually zoom into people and see what they were wearing or holding in their hands, or if they were talking or not. All the while, the stabilization in the camera kept the image locked on with almost no wobbling or shaking, even at maximum zoom. It was a really amazing experience, to be quite honest. And of course, the iPhone 15 Pro isn't exactly bad, but it just doesn't compare. This is such a cool feature for traveling. For example, even my full-on and more expensive camera setup can't reach out that far and record a video or take an image with such clear quality unless I bring a large and bulky lens. Night videos are also surprisingly good too. I mean, the image looks quite clear with only a little bit of graininess, and bright lights in the distance, for example, don't blow out the whole shot like they can on other phones. This does, of course, extend to photos. I think they are better on the S24 compared to the iPhone 15 Pro, especially selfie mode, even with the slight yellowing of skin tones that the S24 seems to have. And again, the images and videos you take just look gorgeous when played back on that amazing screen. I will say I don't enjoy the way Samsung processes images. They occasionally look completely different to what was previewing on the screen versus what the image looks like once it's finished processing the shadows, colors, and HDR, for example. And as far as I can tell, there's no way to turn this off. Thankfully, there are third-party apps that allow you to have more control over this, or you can use Samsung's Expert RAW app or the Pro Photo mode. I also spent some time playing around with Samsung's new Generative photo editing feature. I thought it'd be a gimmick, but it works surprisingly well in most situations, like removing people from the background of a selfie, for example. I noticed in many reviews, the S Pen is often glossed over, and I thought the same thing when switching from my iPhone to the S24, that it'd be a bit of a waste and I'd never use it. So I challenged myself to use it as often as possible. And it is actually so useful. When using the camera, you can single press to take a picture or start recording, double press to switch between the main and selfie cameras, or even use gestures to zoom in or out. This is so useful for group or family photos. Now, I'm doing a bit of renovation in my house at the moment, and having that finite control to draw little diagrams and measurements is so much better than using my big fat finger to clumsily scribble gibberish on my previous iPhone screen. Not to mention, once you pop the pen out, the phone recognizes this and you have the option to immediately start scribbling on a blank screen. And I just found myself using this all the time, especially at my desk. If I need to quickly jot down a list or numbers or measurements, maybe even format it all in a quick table, it just takes 1 second versus unlocking my phone, risk getting distracted by seeing a notification, and loading up a separate notes app. When you're done, you can just save and boom, back to a blank screen. There's just some things I much prefer scribbling down rather than typing into a notes app on my computer or phone, and this just scratches that itch perfectly. It's also surprisingly helpful when editing photos or videos, for example. I can turn color dials, highlight people and objects for the built-in AI to remove, trim clips, among other things. And if you forget to put the S Pen back, the phone will notify you so you don't lose it. It's also attached internally via a magnet, so even if you accidentally bump it and it pops out, you still won't lose it. It's also really responsive. When writing or drawing, there's ever so slightly a bit of resistance from the rubber tip so that it doesn't feel like you're just dragging plastic over glass. It's more like writing on paper. And palm rejection worked really well. I could put my hand almost anywhere on the screen while writing or drawing, and it would just reject the touch input from my hand and focus on the pen tip. Much more so than other phones, which is good because I'm left-handed, so writing is already more difficult than it needs to be. So should you buy the S24 at this point in time? Honestly, with some of the deals and discounts I'm seeing currently, if you need a new phone or need to upgrade, it's a no-brainer. I'll link some of the best discounts I could find down in the description if you're interested. The amazing screen and the camera alone are two things I really didn't expect to enjoy so much, but I think they're just so far ahead of other phones, including the iPhone, that it's worth going for the S24, even if you are a lifelong iPhone fanboy like me. Not to mention, all the other features like battery life, performance, build quality, and all the cool AI stuff that Samsung has packed into the phone.